Okay, this is The Grass is Greener on WXRW 104.1 FM in Milwaukee. I am the host of the program, Gary Grass. With me is my co-host, Babette Grunau.
Hi, and today our guest is Dan Kovalik. Um,
Dan!
Hello, how you doing?
an American human rights advocate and labor rights lawyer, and an author of numerous books. He is taught he has taught international human rights at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, and he's come to us to talk about Syria, Gaza, and the Middle East, an area where he's just recently been. So, welcome, Dan Kovalik.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Hey, so what's the biggest thing you have to report to us right away?
Well, I think the two things that are out there that need to be discussed are, of course, the negotiations between Hamas and the U.S., which really it is between them and Israel's kind of kibitzing, to use a Yiddish term, and also the what they're now calling the Witkoff massacre that happened over the weekend, where, if people don't know, Palestinians in Gaza were lured to get aid from the American contractors or mercenaries, depending on how you look at them. Apparently, these drones, Israeli drones, had speakers, loudspeakers, and said, "Go to this area and you'll get food." And the people went, and the Israelis started shooting on them. And the figures I saw was anywhere between 30 and 200 people killed. It's being called the Witkoff massacre because Witkoff is Trump's negotiator with Hamas. And of course, there were no condemnations by the United States of this. It's just really outrageous. And it's not the first time. Really, the first time the U.S. was trying to give aid and they were putting people in pens, Israel fired on people as well, killing some, not as many as this time.
Right, and there's
So,
that
I mean,
one.
yeah.
There was one with the flour truck too, right? That was, there've been a number of these.
Oh, well, that's been happening all through it. But, now the Americans are now this is their aid program, right? And no aid is getting to people. But people are getting shot. I mean, it's just really, just when you think
They're
it can't
saying
be.
they're
Yeah.
giving aid. They're saying they're giving aid. They have these metal uh lines set up where they have to walk down this metal, you know, area I've seen, and I guess, it keeps them all in a line. It would be easy to just pick them off, I guess.
No, you're right. And, but again, very little aid's getting to them because they're being shot at, right? So you have to dodge the bullets.
Yeah, I'm also thinking, there's a long history of this. Like the U.S. In Afghanistan, recall they dropped food packages that looked just like the unexploded munitions. So the children were lured to what they looked like food, and they got blown up. There's been all sorts of, sometimes much more obviously deliberate, and sometimes less so. Um, Use of food in this manner as a lure, and just the general use of food as a weapon in the war by depriving the entire area of food, depriving it of water, depriving it of everything. Just the conditions there are just, it's just, and you still see these like old videos being run by like these like, the pro-Israel outfits that show like the last remaining restaurant or something, like, oh, look, everything's fine in Gaza. These are the people that are starving for food. Look, they've got everything there. And it's like, like the one last place and the last video that they made of it before they destroyed it. So, you know.
Yeah, no, they have people haven't had food or water or medicine brought in for 90 days. Again, there's been a trickle, but people are starving, and that's the whole point.
How many children do you think have perished? Is there any international UN, UNICEF, any group that has come out with any statistics on this?
Well, I bet, the numbers are all pretty low, but about a week or two ago, I don't remember the exact time, the UN was warning that if children weren't fed in the next 72 hours, 150,000 would die, and they weren't fed. So, I mean, it could be that high. It could be higher. I mean, we just don't know because, who's counting the dead? It was the hospitals, and there's almost no hospitals left in functioning because Israel's blown them all up. But certainly it's in the tens of thousands. And, you know,
Yeah, I've seen higher estimates like months ago, right?
yeah, I've seen,
Yeah,
I mean,
like
months ago, a year ago, they thought already 200,000 people could have been dead. I mean, again, we just don't know for sure because the numbers now that I'm seeing are something like 60,000 or something, but it's way more than that.
yeah,
And you're seeing photos of emaciated children, alive or dead. So, I mean, it's just catastrophic.
yeah. I mean it's not a tragedy though because it's an atrocity, right? If it were not intended, it would be a tragedy, but in this case it's an atrocity.
Yeah, of course it's an atrocity. People they're starving these people on purpose. The little aid that the US is dribbling in between people getting shot is not enough to make any kind of difference. Um, I mean, think about it. Where are the aircraft carriers the U.S. could bring in of aid and airdrops, which Biden did, which weren't that effective, but at least that was done once in a while. I mean, they're not trying.
Right, right.
The point is, they're not trying. This is all theater. And again, the fact you would lure people there, kill them, shows you don't want them to eat. You want them to die. And of course, next time, what are people going to go and get the food? If they know they're going to be shot. I mean, this is
Yeah,
absurd. I mean,
yeah.
absurd isn't even the word.
Yeah, I mean they're left with a very difficult decision because they could be shot or it could be like their last chance at actual food. Depending on how desperate they are, people may go, right? It's just um yeah, I mean it's just a horrible situation all around. And it's not like it's really complicated to figure out what would need to be done um if you were one of the parties responsible, all you'd have to do is stop blocking all the food and stop blowing up the food and making videos of yourself intercepting the food on the border and throwing it all around the ground and stomping on it and laughing and waving Israeli flags, uh, just stop all the atrocities and things would be better because there's plenty of people that are already trying to help that would be able to get in and help if you just stopped blocking them and shooting at them.
There's hundreds of trucks lined up to bring in aid at the Rafah crossing in Egypt, which has been blocked now for, gosh, over a year at least. In fact, there's a march. There's a march of activists from around the world who are going to march from Cairo to the Rafah crossing, demanding it be open. But in the meantime, it's closed. The one flotilla, recall, was fired at when it tried to leave Malta by Israel. They fired on an aid flotilla. There's another ship going now. Greta Thunberg, amongst others, is on it.
Yeah, yeah,
Israel says it's preparing its contingencies for that. So we'll see what they do to that ship.
yeah.
You have
I've already seen the death threats on Twitter, so
Well, Lindsey Graham made an implied death threat. I mean, he saw that. Lindsey Graham said he hopes Greta Thunberg can swim. It's out. It's just incredible. I mean, honestly, I in my lifetime, I've never seen anything like it. The U.S., of course, has been involved in brutal wars throughout my life, but there's always been a fig leaf of pretending to care about civilians, pretending to care about humanitarian law. That fig leaf is gone.
yeah.
There's not even a pretense.
Yeah, I mean the biggest difference here between this and like the worst atrocities of the past decades, right? has been just okay. You may have a U.S. hand behind the killing of 100,000 people in some African country, but it's not in the news. It's not being live streamed over social media, right? That is a huge difference, because in the past, it's, you know, people would have objected to these things if they know. Maybe they wouldn't do enough about it. Maybe they'd be, convinced that it's some BS story and then let it go. But the main way of defending all these things was to keep them completely quiet, and most people didn't know about them or care about them. And now it's like it's there. It's like it maybe not be in the mainstream media as much as it should be, but it's certainly on social media. Lots and lots of people see this and know about it, and it just it's just completely brazen at this point. It's just like, no, we're doing it and we're gonna do it, and you're not gonna stop us.
Yeah, no, it's really incredible. Yeah, I mean, that's right. Every day we're seeing these massacres on our phones. Um, you saw that horrible video last week of the little girl trying to get out of the fire. Her school
Right.
was bombed, and her entire family was killed, and she's trying to. I mean, I guess she was able to save herself. The rest of her family's dead, which is fairly
They've
typical
been
now.
hitting
Children.
schools, haven't they?
What's that?
They've been hitting schools, haven't they?
They've been hitting everything. They hit a dialysis. They just bombed a dialysis clinic. They destroyed um, a fertility clinic, destroying 4,000 embryos, which again shows the genocidal nature of this, right? Obviously, the embryos present no danger to anyone. They're trying to destroy the past, present, and future of the Palestinians. They've destroyed every church, every mosque. I mean, there's virtually no building standing um, in Gaza. And what buildings are standing, they seem to be intent on destroying. Um, yes, and again, it's not the first time this has happened. The U.S. did that in North Korea in 1950 to 53. It was said they didn't leave a building standing over 1 story tall. By that point, most of the people in North Korea were living in tunnels. They bombed South Korea as well, but not quite as thoroughly. But again, this is being filmed. This is being broadcast every day, and again, there's just no. Yeah, there's barely a condemnation. It's yeah, I'm speechless. I'm absolutely speechless, and I fear certainly the goal is to destroy the Palestinian people in Gaza. And they may get away with that. They may get away with it. It seems that no one will stop them. And that gets to the negotiations, if we can talk, because I think the
Yeah.
negotiations is also very reflective of the intentions of the parties here and what's going on. I mean, so again, we've been teased over and over by the Biden administration, now the Trump administration, that a ceasefire deal was imminent, right? And over the weekend, there was some hope that we were given that that would happen, and it failed. And one of the reasons it failed is because Israel won't accept any permanent cessation of hostilities. Because again, they want to just destroy the population. Um, and one proof of this is that Hamas is actually in the latest round, although it's not the first time they've proposed this, at least in general, but now specifically they've proposed that they would disarm and disband. Hamas would, if they could get a permanent cessation of hostilities. Hamas would go away, and Israel rejected that portion of the peace proposal. And why? Clearly because they need Hamas there as an excuse, as a pretext to do what they really want to do, and that's not destroy Hamas; it's to destroy the population. That's what's going on here.
Yeah, I'm also thinking of the um the first Iraq war when Saddam Hussein was in Kuwait, and the U.S. described, I forget which official it was. It was a Dick Cheney or someone said, or maybe it was like James Baker back then. The nightmare scenario would be that Saddam Hussein does exactly what we ask, and then we don't have any chance to destroy him permanently. Um, and then the Iraqis withdrew from Kuwait, and the result was the highway of death, where we uh, you know just destroyed their retreating forces for daring to do what we asked them to do, and destroy as many things as we can. Because that was the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal wasn't the defense of Kuwait. The ultimate goal was to destroy things, and um, it's again, these are all kind of recurring themes. It's just happening right now in this particular place, and really, really badly. And
And mostly to women and children. And again, that's not
yeah,
completely unique, but again, the numbers we know are that there's more maimed children in this conflict than any other conflict, more children killed than any other conflict, more doctors killed, more UN staff killed, more
right.
journalists killed. I mean, when you look at the numbers,
That's
it's
true.
unique in that way. The thoroughness of this, the thoroughness of the destruction of a people, of a place, is really something. Again, what I think the latest figure I saw, if I'm not mistaken, is that the U.S. The U.S. Well, the U.S. with the U.S. help, Israel has now dropped the equivalent of 6 atomic bombs on Gaza.
Oh my gosh.
This is a thorough destruction
And
of.
and remind us how big Gaza is, right? It's Israel is like the size of a postage stamp, and Gaza is like one tiny little nib on that stamp. Um,
Yeah,
it's this teeny little place to
it's a
be.
tiny little place, and now minimally what's happening minimally is that all the Gazans left are being already before October 7th. Gaza was the most densely populated place in the world. Now they're taking what's left of the people in Gaza and putting them in a third of what they had before, in a third of the space they had before. And they're going to put them in concentration camps. That's the plan. Of course, they deny their concentration camps. They say we're only putting them in camps. We're only concentrating them in camps. They're not concentration camps. Right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. We're gonna concentrate them in some camps. If only there was a word for that.
yeah, if only there was a mot juste, as the French would say. Um, and the U.S., of course, is going to be part of that concentration camp system. They're going to, the plan is to give people food and water based on basically good conduct, meaning that they don't resist and they don't raise a fuss. So that's and again, that's the best I think they can hope for. I fear the goal is to get to a point where there's no one left there. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, Netanyahu will say, "Oh, well, we want people to voluntarily emigrate from Gaza." First of all, it wouldn't be voluntary because they're being forced to leave, so that's ridiculous. But also, there's no way for people to leave. Every crossing is blocked. The Mediterranean is blocked. There's no way out. So there's no way to emigrate, even if they want to. I have friends in Gaza, some of whom are desperate to get out. There's no way out. So, again, what's the goal? The goal is not just ethnic cleansing, it really is genocide. I mean, that's what makes this a genocide. They want to leave no one standing. And by the way, not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank. And they've just announced the biggest round of new settlements ever in Israeli, well, at least probably since 19, I believe, 67, maybe even 48. But in any case, they've just announced the building of 22 new settlements in the West Bank, which of course will displace more Palestinians. And they're killing people in the West Bank, and they're
Mhm.
arresting people in the West Bank, including kids. They passed a law recently saying they could arrest kids as young as 12. And they're arresting kids even younger than that, and they're being tortured and they're being raped, and that should be pointed out. Rape is now being used on a mass scale by the Israelis. And again, they're not even hiding that. They've had debates in the Knesset about whether they could rape Palestinians, and
They've
it's
had
been
debates in the Knesset about
oh, they
that?
absolutely have.
Yeah. They had protests over the right to rape when they tried to restrict it a little bit at one point.
Well, yeah, when they tried to arrest
Yeah.
10 guys who gang raped someone, yeah, they were protesting in their favor. There's been rabbis in Israel saying raping Palestinians is fine. No, that thing,
Yeah.
we've crossed the Rubicon.
Right.
The occupation, yeah.
I have to say, it's like there are plenty of American Jews whose stomachs turn um, at a lot of this, but particularly when you have, you know, uh, people in Israel, rabbis and so forth, saying we are called upon as Jews to do this, and to do all these horrible, horrible things. And it's like that's not what any of my Jewish friends feel they're called upon to do, and it's just utterly repulsive. And you know, all this talk about anti-Semitism in the United States, you want to know where a lot of that comes from, right? It's all coming from Israel and the responses to Israel, because that there is no greater generator of anti-Semitism in the world than to hear these things that are coming out of Israel. Minor point compared to what's happening to the Palestinians, but still, it's a thing.
Yeah, no, I'm speechless about it. And again, I just look at it and I'll be very curious to see what happens with this ship that again Greta Thunberg is on, and see how brazen the Israelis will be in treating it, even with someone that famous on board. I mean, the Israelis they don't seem, they do clearly want to show that there are no limits to what they can do, right? In
Yeah.
fact, I forget who, Israeli official recently said, he said, we have now shown we can kill 100 Palestinians in a day and no one cares, right? Um, and that's right. And then they'll try for 150 or 200. I mean, they keep pushing the boundaries farther and farther. I think the Israelis are surprised, to be honest, at how much the world has tolerated this. I think they expected. In fact, I know that there's some indications. I forget who, some officials had said this privately. They were surprised. They thought Biden would have put the kibosh on this a long time ago. I think they were more hopeful that Trump would allow it, and he has. But I think they've been surprised that they've been allowed to do this as long as they have, as brutally as they have. And I think they now know they have the green light to just keep going. And the world, you know, will have to reckon with that. The moral consequences of that.
I don't suppose that this conversation is going to get any lighter and happier when we move to Syria.
No, perhaps not, but I guess we have to deal with reality. And well, I mean, I guess let's end this segment at least by saying that there are good people in the world who are doing good things to stop this war in Palestine. Again,
Mm-hmm.
these people on the flotillas, these people who are going to do this march from Cairo to the Rafah crossing, the students who are protesting, the many students have lost diplomas and potential careers, and professors who've lost jobs. And, a lot of people, there are good people out there risking a lot to stop this. And I do want to applaud those people, encourage people to continue taking a stand. And that, if there's any hope for humanity, it's in those people and in those acts.
Yeah, I mean, I recently saw a video, Irish fighter in a cage fight against an Israeli opponent, had him pinned down, was just beating the guy brutally and yelling "Free Palestine" in his face as he clubbed him, and that's a video that's going viral right now.
Yeah, people are angry, and they should be angry. I mean, again, how can you not be angry? I mean, and you should be angry. How can you not be angry seeing these children being maimed and murdered? And it's just something. Again, it's not that it's never happened before, but I've never seen it like this.
Yeah.
on a daily basis. And usually there's some respite from it. There's somewhere for people to go. There's no respite. There's no safe place. It's staggering,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. Go see a Disney film and have Gal Gadot sneer at you. Oh, okay. Um, so okay, I hate to even ask, but Syria now.
Yeah, well, so what's happening in Syria? I mean, Al Qaeda now is fully pretty fully ensconced there, though it looks like even that, the coalition of groups that make up what is called HTS, which is a successor to the Al Nusra Front of Al Qaeda, um, they're now in charge. They're being recognized by a lot of the world, including the U.S. Trump met with the new leader, Al Jilani, who again was the head of ISIS, the head of the Al Nusra Front of Al Qaeda. Said
Yeah.
he's going to normalize relations.
Yeah. Well, he's wearing a suit now, so they can go shake his hand.
Yes, but what's happening under their reign? I mean, religious minorities continue to be terrorized, especially the Alawites, but also Christians and Shia and Druze. Thousands of people have been killed in that type of anti-sectarian violence by militias of the government or related to the government. And again, there's about 26 different factions of this group of the HTS, and it looks like that's fraying a bit the unity there. In part because a third of those fighters, out of the 30,000 of their fighters, about 10,000 are foreign fighters who have no loyalty to Syria, don't even speak the language there, and whose only reason to be there is to carry out jihad, and that's what they want to do. And to the extent Shalani is hesitant in fully embracing that, he may, he may be in trouble. So the fear is that as bad as the government is there now, um, a worse situation could happen with either a worse group coming to power or having just a full blown civil war.
Yeah.
Israel also kind of took advantage of the situation, right? They decided to kind of barge in as the place was being taken over by the jihadists and by, I mean, basically coming from the Turkish area. They came, I don't know if it was through the Golan Heights or just through some other part, but they just kind of barged in.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
well,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
again, yeah, and the new government has allowed them to do that with no resistance. They came in, you're right, through the south, through the Golan Heights.
Right.
Yeah,
Right up the
yeah.
border with Lebanon, straight up to Damascus.
Yes, and even I believe beyond, certainly in terms of bombing campaigns, they've had even beyond Damascus. But again, while the new government of Syria, has the wherewithal to engage in murder of religious minorities, it has not had any interest in fighting Israel. And in fact, the interior minister of Syria put out a new map of Syria. It did not even include the Golan Heights, kind of effectively
Well, that
ceding
says
that to
something.
Israel.
That says something about where they stand or who's
Well, because
backing them. So
they're a tool. They're a tool of the West. They were brought there by the West, and they're being supported by the West. And so their enemy is not Israel or the United States. It's their own religious minorities. It's the Palestinians. The new government has arrested and kicked out a bunch of Palestinian resistance leaders. The West for now has
Well,
won Syria.
yeah.
And this,
Although I wouldn't say the U.S. and Israel are not their enemy. The U.S. and the Israel are their enemy that they're saving for the future, right? Because right now everything is good. They're on the same side, but these groups, they have a doctrine, and the doctrine includes also making war against the United States and Israel. That's that's coming down the
Well,
road
see, but that's
sometime,
what
right?
they say. That's what they say. I mean, but Jelani keeps saying he wants to have good relations with Israel, that Israel, can be a friend. I mean, they say that, but, Israel has bragged for years. They've never been once attacked by Al Qaeda or ISIS. Not once. And, this is, I
Well,
hate to say, this is a theater. This is theater. They are a creation of the West, and they do their bidding. And even Israel was when fighters of ISIS and Al Qaeda got injured on the battlefield against Assad. Israel would you know help to patch them up and send them back to fight.
yeah, maybe you may be right. It may be all a fraud, but I mean, the way this is depicted in internal doctrine for the organizations, it's there's the near enemy and there's the far enemy. The near enemy being the local minorities that they don't like, the people that are in different religious sects from them, and then there's the people, the far enemy, which is places like the United States. And the original Al Qaeda had a doctrine which says we're going to go after the far enemy, which is things like 9/11. And then one of the splits that occurred was, who do we fight first, right? Maybe we had the doctrine wrong. Lots of groups said, well, you know what? We could just be taking, this is what bin Laden did at first. He took arms and money from the United States and training. It's like, we should go back and do that first, right? We can always save them for later, but right, let's utilize a friendship with them while we got it, right? So, I mean, I still think eventually they will turn, because eventually, we do not see eye to eye with them. They are useful to the U.S. empire, and the U.S. empire is useful to them, so they have an alliance for the time, and that's probably going to last for a long time. But I think they still have this in the corner of their eye that eventually, kind of like the Nazis in Ukraine used to give little conferences where they talk about this. It's like, first we take all the arms we can from the US and Europe, and then when we're done here, we're gonna go back over there, and you know, because they're a bunch of decadent, liberal wusses, and they need to be taught a lesson, right? So I think there's this, and of course, the Nazis in Ukraine are never going to get the chance to do that because they're going to get wiped out. But that's a whole nother issue. So yeah, I have a bunch of remaining questions on Syria.
Good. I need questions. Give me them. Give me your
So
question.
so what's happening with the whole third of the country that the U.S. was occupying before these people came in and declared victory over the former Assad government?
As I understand it, despite Trump's, you know, seasonal promises to leave Syria, promises he's been making since his first term in office, and that he's reiterated recently, as far as I can tell, the U.S. is still ensconced there. And I don't see any real move to get out at this point.
Is there any like legal framework for this, or is it just a matter of, yeah, we like you guys, we recognize you as legitimate government now, but we're still just going to hang around in this third of the country and keep all the oil?
Well, that's right. I mean, there's nothing legal about this. It's always been an illegal occupation. They were not invited in, unlike Russia and Iran, who were invited in by the legitimate government. And even the current government, I don't think has extended any invitation to them, but they're occupying it anyway, totally illegally. But that's what we do. That's what Israel does. I mean, that's
Well, I
so.
mean,
Right now, you have the U.S. taking a third. You have Israel taking a big portion. They're within about 15 kilometers of Damascus. You got Turkey taking a bit of the north. I mean, Syria's dead as a nation, at least for now. I mean, it could rise like the phoenix. I hope it does, but for the moment, it's the nation we've known as Syria is gone.
it's just, I mean, for the legality before was, well, we're at war with this country, So we're going to send our troops there. We're going to occupy its land, and we're going to hold on to the territory that we're occupying. But usually, once the war is over and you've won, and you recognize the government that's sitting there, it's like now they're your friend. Now you give them back their territory, and here it seems like we're playing both sides at the same time. Yes, they're the legitimate government. Yes, we're our allies. Yes, we have good diplomatic relationships with them, but we're still just going to keep a third of their land. You know,
Well, yeah, and again, first of all, just to be clear, I don't think it was ever legal. Again,
oh
first of all,
no,
we
no,
never
I
declared.
no, but
Yeah,
that was the fig leaf, right? We're at war with
but
them.
it
Of
was a
course, yeah,
fig leaf,
yeah,
I
yeah.
suppose. But yeah, now it's like, yeah, now that we're allegedly friends with them, then yeah, why aren't we leaving again? Because we want the oil, and I think probably if you press some people in the White House, they'd say we were there to keep, protect the Kurds. Who were there again? I wouldn't think that. I don't believe that's true. But again, I mean that's probably one a fig leaf they might use. But I think it goes back to what Trump said during his first term. He says we're there for the oil, and I think that's the real reason.
Right, right. Trump isn't big into fig leaves anyway. He's just big into like, well, this is in our interest, so we're going to do it.
Yes, yes. I mean, in fact, you recall when he said that. Assad, at the time he was still president, said that he thought Trump was the greatest president ever because at least he was honest, um, which is interesting.
um, so these new guys, this fragmented set of organizations that stormed in and took the government. Apart from having militias running around the country, like terrorizing and beheading people, and like finding some suits to put on somewhere so you can meet with foreign leaders and raise their flags and stuff. Um, what are they doing to actually run the government? Who do they have to run the government? I mean, just from a technical standpoint,
Yeah.
these
Well,
guys.
yeah. I think that's a great question. I think they have very little will to do that, and that's one of the criticisms of them is that this is a terrorist organization, and they do that very well. They're very good at that, by the way. If you want to give them their due, I'm being facetious, but they don't have much of an intention to govern in any serious way. They got rid of they got rid of all the police and the army and the judges, and they've, I guess, tried to fill some of those posts. But I mean, I think that there is no functioning legal system at the moment. I think people, for example, who are being arrested in the thousands, by the way, have no ability to challenge that in court because I don't think there's many courts functioning. Um, I think that's a big problem. I don't think there's much governing happening.
They collect taxes the way the Romans did, just go out and farm it.
There's some of that, especially I know in Damascus they've started to tax Christians for being Christians. But yeah, I mean, and they're waiting. Well, I mean, the truth is, for now, they're waiting on all this aid that Europe has promised them, and the U.S. has said they would end the sanctions. So, they're hoping money's going to be rolling in, which it probably will, and they'll probably steal it. I mean, again, I don't think there's a lot of governance going to happen.
There isn't much administration, is what you're saying.
That's the point, because they don't have a will for it. Again, the goal was to get rid of Assad, and that's been done. To actually replace the government, that's not much. That's not much of the plan there. So it's a very sad situation. Again, I think it does not exist as a nation state, at the moment. It's gonna even Marco Rubio. I mean, he said, I think correctly, that they could really just descend into civil war. I think that's a real possibility.
Yeah, no, it sounds like the Wild West, right? Um,
Yeah,
let me ask about the sanctions then, right? And I've seen a little bit of debate on social media about the wisdom of lifting sanctions. Um, there are some people that are advocates for the U.S. not retaining sanctions on Syria. I think in part this is, I mean, if you look at what happened in Afghanistan after the Taliban took over and the U.S. left, you know, Taliban aren't great people. There's some reasons why you'd want to sanction them for certain reasons, but what the U.S. did is they had these draconian sanctions that just kept the entire country impoverished and hungry, and it was just horrible for most of the people in Afghanistan. Um, so I think it sounds like maybe if you have the right kinds of sanctions, that might be an appropriate thing to do. As much as I'm opposed to kind of unilateral coercive measures generally, but there's been some discussion of that. So
yeah, there is. Yeah. I think that it seems to me that I think the majority view is that even people who don't like Jelani feel that these sanctions need to be lifted. I mean, because who's it hurting? I mean, it's destroying. I mean, it has destroyed for many years the economy, the well-being of people who have had like an hour or two of electricity a day, who lack food, who lack medicine. I mean, it's been some of the most devastating sanctions ever imposed on a country, and that's what led. It's what paved the way for the coup, and that's what it was by Jelani against Assad. You know that the country had been so worn down by the war and the sanctions that
How many years did that go on?
Well, really, since the Obama administration, he was imposing sanctions. I forget the exact date, but I want to say around 2000, let's just say 14. But then the real terrible sanction, the draconian sanctions came under Trump, I believe, in the form of the Caesar sanctions around 2017, early in his administration. So you're talking 8 years roughly of very draconian sanctions. And so, and by the way, they were designed, and some U.S. officials were very, open about this, to prevent the country from even being able to reconstruct after the war. And I was just there in January, and I saw that. I mean, entire cities that are still rubble. And so I can tell you my own view on it. And and I've thought about it a lot because I very much oppose Jelani. But in the end, I feel the sanctions need to be lifted. I think they are cruel, they're illegal, and they're illegal no matter who's in power in Damascus. I think that other measures could be brought to bear to put pressure on the new government to do the right thing. For example, to hold elections, to hold free and fair elections, which it's said now is won't be done for 4 to 5 years. And also to protect minority groups. And what are those other things? I mean, one, I think you could certainly have staged aid to the country based on certain measures. I think you don't have to recognize the new government and still allow the sanctions to be lifted. You could say, well, we're not going to exchange ambassadors. We're not going to recognize the new government until you shape up your act. I mean, but I really don't. I really do. And even other leftists I've seen, very prominent ones, like Kevork, if you've seen him.
Oh, Almasian? Yeah.
What's that?
Kevork Almasian.
Yeah. Are pretty adamant that, look, the sanctions need to go. I mean, because they're really doing nothing but hurt the people. And you got to allow the people to have an economy and to survive and to rebuild. Yeah. And so that's where I come out on the debate. And yeah, I mean, the debate goes both ways because, of course, there's a claim that this is not a legitimate government, which it's not. I don't think it's legitimate. I think the only way there'll be a legitimate government in Damascus is if there are elections that are held that include all ethnic groups and but again, I don't think sanctions are the way to bring that about. I think they're cruel. I think they're certainly illegal. I think they're immoral. And again, the country suffered enough. So that's where I come out on it.
Right. Well, I mean,
despite everything. Yeah.
is part of the problem there the fact that people that they need to run things have fled the country, right? They've been driven out by conditions, starting with the effects of all these years of sanctions, and then compounded, and massively accelerated by having like death squads come to your part of the city and go house to house, right? So that's got to be a great incentive for people to have left Syria that have towns that they need to reconstruct things.
Right.
So part of the task then is to have an environment to which those people can return to rebuild things.
Well, that's right. And again, but that could be done in other ways. I mean, I was at one point, I'm not presently, but I was at one point representing the Allied Association of the U.S. And one of the things they wanted is for the Security Council of the UN to authorize a humanitarian corridor for people to be able to, one, freely get aid because parts of Syria, particularly on the coast, were being blockaded by the government. And also to, have UN troops in there to prevent, ethnic cleansing and ethnic violence, which I would support. And you could do those things and still have the sanctions lifted, right? There's things that could be done to allow the country to develop economically, but also to protect the people. Because I mean, even if you just deny this, even if you just kept the sanctions in place, all it would do is continue having people in a horrible state, and it's not really protecting anybody. I mean, right? I mean, the sanctions have been there in place since the new government took power, and it hasn't stopped them from being brutal. So
impoverishing a country is not a classic strategy for drawing people into it that you need there.
Right. Or for creating democracy, and that's what we always argue, laying siege to a country does not democratize it or bring about, freedom or what, I mean, so, and I realize that consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds, but also I do see a reason to be consistently opposed to these types of sanctions regimes. So
Right.
that's where I come out on.
Right. They're unilateral, they're unlawful, there's no basis for them in international or probably even national law. They're just typically just things that are done. I mean, I guess some of them are probably okay by national law, but none of them have any international validity at all.
No, these are unilaterally imposed sanctions without Security Council authorization. They have extraterritorial application, meaning that it's not just that the U.S. refuses to trade with Syria, which the U.S. is they're permitted to trade with who they want and refuse to trade with who they don't want. But these sanctions, the way the U.S. does these sanctions, is to prevent other countries from trading with Syria, and that is not allowed unless there is a sanctions regime put in place by the Security Council, which has not happened here.
Right. Well, although it's kind of funny to like complain about the effects on trade by third countries when we are just unilaterally breaking every trade agreement that we've ever had by imposing tariffs on every single country in the world right now. So it's like,
well, and that's true too.
Just utter craziness. Do you want to briefly talk at all about Lebanon? You were recently in Lebanon?
Recently in Lebanon, right?
Yeah. So I went
things going on there.
Yeah, I went to Syria, and to get to Syria, for the most part, you go through Lebanon first because the airport hadn't been functional for many years. It's starting to be functional now, but it's still not that functional. So yeah, you fly into Beirut and you drive about 4 hours or so to Damascus, which is what I did. So I was in Lebanon for a bit. I also went to South Lebanon. Laith Marouk, if you know that journalist, was very kind to take me to South Lebanon, which was great. So yeah, I mean, I got to see what was happening there. And Lebanon, well, first of all, there were just elections held there, and Hezbollah won big there. They won huge, in a lot of areas. I think they've become very popular because they're the only group resisting foreign intervention from Israel, from Syria. The new government of Syria has been violating the border areas. And, Hezbollah is really the only armed group that defends the homeland of Lebanon. The Lebanese military really doesn't. And I witnessed that. When I went to South Lebanon, there were people, in fact, camping out, trying to get back home to occupied areas in South Lebanon, areas occupied by the Israelis. And it was the Lebanese army holding them back, preventing them from getting back to South Lebanon. So, Lebanon, the government of Lebanon, at least the executive branch, where the president was recently handpicked by the U.S. on the floor of the parliament. Literally, the U.S. ambassador was there to handpick him.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah. The executive branch and the military are completely disloyal. They are not patriotic. They completely bow to the U.S. and Israel. So Hezbollah is the only group that really defends the homeland. So they've really gained in popularity, even amongst Christians who've woken up to the fact that, again, their government really doesn't protect them, that they're in danger now more than ever because, again, now, it used to be that Lebanon was only attacked from the south by Israel, right? Because Syria was, Syria was not attacking Lebanon under Assad. Now the new government is engaged in, again, skirmishes along the border. And the new government is allowing Israel also to make some inroads around that border. So, now Lebanon's completely surrounded by hostile forces. And even the Christians are like, this ain't good. Especially because, right, you now have jihadists in power in Syria who don't like us. So they're arming themselves, the Christians, and they see Hezbollah as an ally, So, and then, Israel's still occupying a lot of the South and still bombing a lot of the South. And the truth is, even Hezbollah at the moment is not putting up much of an opposition to that for, I think, a couple reasons. One, I think they're still trying to rebuild from being pretty devastated by Israel in the war that just happened between Lebanon and Israel. Also, I think they want the ceasefire to stay in place. Now, they may say, well, that's not much of a ceasefire if Israel's occupying the South and attacking the South. But they're not bombing Beirut. Okay, they're not bombing other areas. And, that is some comfort, So I think there have been some bombings since the ceasefire and those in Beirut, but not many, So, again,
It's
I
all
think
relative, it's like,
it's all, yeah, it's all relative,
an occasional bombing by a hostile power in your capital city, it's like, that's just that's the definition of a working ceasefire. But it kind of is.
In that area. It is. Unfortunately, they've learned to have to live with that. And again, our alternative is all out war, where literally, Israel is threatening to wipe out the country, and as one of my good friends said it, an activist and a guy who spends a lot of time in the Levant said, Hezbollah realize, they're very cognizant of the fact that Lebanon is not theirs to sacrifice. And so I think that, they're holding fire at the moment. Now that could change any time. I mean, I do think you could see that war really heat up. But for the moment, again, for the most part, it's a quiet, but to Israel's advantage, which is Israel's even building a wall, has built a wall that had already existed within the Israeli borders, but now they've extended the wall into South Lebanon, dividing parts of South Lebanon. So now people who lived in Lebanon are now within that wall in Israel's borders,
So they've taken more territory.
They have. They have. And that is probably not something that in the long term Hezbollah is going to allow. But again, for now, they're kind of,
You don't
resigned to
hear
that.
about that here.
No, you don't. Well, you don't hear about a lot, do you?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
why we have radio shows like this.
yeah. I mean, it's like it's that Lebanon territory that Israel really, really wants. So that's sort of its real and territorial ambition. It's just like, people read their kids' books about the territory of Lebanon and how it's theirs, and they're going to have it soon. And
Well,
that's
yeah, I mean, it's Greater Israel. They have designs on big chunk of the Middle East, parts of Egypt, parts of Jordan, parts of Saudi Arabia, big parts of Lebanon, big parts of Syria. And there's some progress Israel's making in making that a reality.
right.
But again, that is not to be discussed in public company. Well, which reminds me of things that are not supposed to be discussed in public company. I went and saw this. You're not going to think this is relevant, but it is. Just bear with me for this
Okay,
moment.
okay.
My older son and I went to see the latest Mission Impossible last night. And one of the subplots is, well, a big part of the plot is that the world, because of this entity, they're about to engage in a full-scale nuclear war against each other. Okay? And all the armed nuclear states are about to fire on each other because they're being tricked and blah blah blah. Okay, but here's the interesting part. They kept flashing at various times to the flags of the countries that have nuclear weapons, and one was Israel. They kept flashing to the Israeli flag, which is kind of a subversive thing to do
Yeah,
because while everyone knows that Israel has nuclear weapons, that is like it's supposed to be a secret. It's the worst kept secret in the world, but it is not supposed to be kind of acknowledged. And here you have a major film that shows, and at times they'd even show like a nuclear missile being starting to be launched, and it had an Israeli flag on it. So anyway, I thought that was very funny. So there you go. Thanks, Tom Cruise, for that.
thank you, Tom Cruise, I guess. Yeah, no, like 9 nuclear states, something like that now. It's South Africa gave them up, but that leaves 9 left. Um
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's I wish we had more time that we could talk about Israel's sort of ongoing low-level warfare against Iran. And I mentioned the Houthis at least once. Go
Yeah.
Ansarallah. Um, but that's all the time we have. So we just want to thank you very much for having been on, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Well, thanks for having me on. Again, I'm always happy to be on the air in Milwaukee, a city that I love a lot. My sister went to Marquette, and I love Milwaukee. So hello to everyone in Milwaukee. Thanks for having me on.
All right.
Thank you.
On behalf of
Okay.
all Milwaukeeans, hello back.
Thank you very much. I raise a beer to you. Okay. Thank you very much. All right.
All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Dan Kovalik.